I have a master's degree in mental health counseling. I have another master's degree in forensic psychology. I've been practicing, in the psych field for nearly 20 years and am in license to do mental health counseling in the states of Washington and South Dakota. I grew up fundamentalist Christian, Baptist, if you want to go down the denominational route. And I jokingly refer to my, self as having been like to the right of Attila the Hun. I mean, it was, there wasn't too much further that I could go that was right wing. And by right wing, I do in fact mean both, religiously and politically. I mean, to me, Jerry Falwell was right there with Rush Limbaugh. Which obviously I'm dating myself with those references, but it was very much like, the truth of the gospel was not just something to be felt personally, but something that needed to be and should be shared with the whole world. It was not just a personal ethic, but one that needed to be done socially and nationally. So the process of getting out of that is one that, in many ways started with studying philosophy at Bible college. Admittedly, I found out later the professors weren't stupid. They well knew that I had maybe not gone completely atheist, but certainly was pretty close to it. I mean, to their credit, they allowed me to, study in a way that was a little different and allowed me the space to ask a lot of questions that I appreciated at the time. But even so, in some ways that helped soften the landing, but still, I mean, questions of my own sexuality, how I, think about politics, ethics, relations of gender roles. But the brain doesn't get rid of anything. It still holds on to what is perceived as being truths. We hold this duality of going, I know it's nonsense, and I still have a concern. And that struggle itself can become its own issue, its own source of anxiety and depression and issues related to your own identity. Because, how then, when we were, being raised as a fundamentalist, it's like, well, doubt itself is a problem. And that lesson continues, even when we know that doubt is actually where we find freedom. And even when you're not a believer anymore, having that experience of going, I know this, but I'm feeling that. How do I find the path through those two endpoints? Sometimes atheists can be, frankly, belligerent towards believers in a sense of, well, come on, this is just fake. Get over it. Just because we find out and recognize that a belief is false, it doesn't remove the very real consequences of having put those beliefs into practice. And the loss that I and so many others have and continue to feel from that loss of the possibilities that previously now would never be realized, the sense of waste at times when we think back at our lives, and the sense now I have to hold this garbage in my head that rears up every so often and is in many ways acting like a thief, stealing from us the joy that we now realize that we can have, and yet it's there, just waiting to snatch it. And so no, just because something is false does not in any way mean that we are not going to struggle with having that, be known to us, having it be eliminated. We can still struggle. So I do a lot of work with veterans and also those who are struggling with identity issues and other forms of trauma. And with that there's obviously post-traumatic stress disorder, There's anxiety disorders that are related to it. But then there's also religious trauma, which I tend to link a lot with identity issues. So I've been working with people for several years with this, and recently I've developed a online course, and it's called Reclaiming Your Life. And the idea here is not to solve everything. In fact, I'm not really even big on answering questions. I'm not the replacement guru. I'm not the replacement priest. I do not want that role. What is instead is an appreciation for how does psychology, properly informed by science and evidence-based practices and a philosophy of humanism and naturalism, make sense of that struggle of, I know this is wrong and I still feel this way. And that, in fact, that connection is where I believe that some programs out there get it, well, frankly, I think they get it wrong, because they take that stressor, that uncertainty, and go, yes, what you need to do is deconstruct everything. You need to start from ground zero and kind of unearth, almost take a rototiller to everything that you thought before. And I actually look at it and go, no, actually, that's not what we need to do. Because instead we start with, wait a minute, if the belief in a deity is false, because, well, there is no such thing, therefore, there has never been any such thing. We never related to a God because a God never was. So what does that leave us with? It's a recognition that what we've been relating to all along was our own humanity. It was us. The voice that we heard when we prayed was our own. It was not some cosmic entity. It was us. And as a consequence, the moral decisions, the thoughts that we had were not anything that were in relationship to that God. They were in relationship to us. And when we start there, when we start with a deeper appreciation for our humanity that we share with, well, everybody else, we don't have to ground up that experience, because in many ways what we're then doing is denying the multitude of what it means to be human. That we never removed our humanity from it. We still have a deep desire for connecting with others. We still have a deep desire to figure out what we now look at as truth. We still have a deep desire to understand what is right and wrong, even if there are now probably considerably more gray areas than there used to be. But we still want to have that sense of meaning and purpose and a direction for our lives. And importantly, that's what we were trying from the beginning, is to answer those questions. And I don't want to remove those questions. I want to simply acknowledge that the answers that we thought we had just weren't as all-encompassing. They weren't 100% true. And how awesome is that, actually? Because now we get to the opportunity to figure stuff out in ways that are no longer straitjacketed by dogma, that we can actually go, I don't know. Cool. What's next? The course is Reclaiming Your Life, Journey Through Deconversion and Healing. And it's a completely online, at your own pace course that can be found through lifeweavings.com. And you can also look me up on social media anywhere. And what it is a brief 6-lesson course. Will take, takes about a few hours of actual video, but also will include, skills, ways of framing your experience in a way that will help with the journey out of fundamentalism and towards flexibility, in order to basically address some of the concerns that often happen, including anxiety about life purpose, depression of what it means to have these thoughts that perhaps before used to be judged. And how do we relate to one another, including ourselves and our own sexuality, as an example. And in a small way, it starts that path of being able to ask those questions. Here's some direction, and here's, laying the groundwork then for how you're going to move forward. For anybody who is struggling with deconversion, anybody who has looked back at their life, and I'm smiling because to me at this point, my deconversion is not something that I struggle with in a bad way. It's something that I struggle with as a almost form of birthing. It's a way of giving new life in a way that is not tied to a deity. It's tied to my humanity. And that's what I try to get everybody to help see, is that your deconversion story is not about destroying yourself. It's about setting yourself free. And the concerns that very legitimately exist at the beginning don't completely always go away, but they get better. They become almost friends, maybe that you don't necessarily invite over for dinner all the time, but certainly friends that are just simply part of your past. And you learn to get excited for what's going to come next.